Welcome to the third part of week 10 in Greek 1, CRST 271. Now that we have reviewed English grammar, I know it has taken some time. I think learning chapter 9 of our textbook will be much easier for you. I'd like to share that chapter. Let's look at it together. I'll go down to that page. Here we are. And if you will turn in your textbook, I believe it's page 86, you can follow along as we look at chapter 9, the present indicative of middle and passive verbs. Right away, I hope that you recognize some terms that we have been talking about in the last two videos. All the verbs met so far follow the pattern either of luo for their present indicative active. This means present tense, indicative mood, and active voice, or something close to it. By something close, he means, for example, the epsilon omega verbs and the alpha omega verbs. They contract, so they are close to the pattern of luo. But there are other types of pattern that are translated by an English verb with a present indicative active meaning, the pattern followed by a group of verbs which have a Greek middle voice but no active voice. And also the pattern followed by what we call me verbs. We won't talk about those verbs right now. Those we'll talk about beginning in Greek 2. We'll need to talk about them. There'll be some more forms to memorize, but they're very common in the Greek New Testament. Sorry, I'm going to need a drink of water. But you need to, you will need to learn them. Right now, we need to remember that the Greek verb has three voices. We just learned about this in our last two videos: the active, the middle, and the passive. The difference in meaning between these three revolves around the relationship between the subject of the verb and the action of the verb. In the active voice, the subject initiates the action of the verb. In the middle voice, the subject participates in the action of the verb in the action, while in the passive voice, the subject of the verb receives the action of the verb. So there's also three words that help us understand voice in Greek. Again, the active initiates, the subject initiates the action. In the middle voice, the subject participates in the action. And in the passive voice, the subject receives the action. Now here's our problem. The English verb only has two voices, active and passive. Because English speakers do not have a middle voice in their language, they usually find it a challenge to understand the meaning of the Greek middle voice. There is good news though. The middle voice is almost always translated by an English active voice. And that is pretty much all you need to know about the middle voice at this stage. We will also call this middle voice deponent, middle or passive, for reasons we'll see in just a moment. The verbs that we're going to learn in the vocabulary, there are three kinds of verbs. We have already had the first kind. The second kind will have this ending, oh my. And there'll also be three verbs in the vocabulary that have passive forms that are usually translated by the English active voice. So I think if we go down and look at the forms first, the endings, we'll then be able to understand what we're talking about here. If you look at this table, I believe it's found on page 87, bottom of page 87 in your textbook. And you notice that we have some new endings to learn. So far, we have learned o, es, a, omen, ete, usi. Or we had contractions, as in agapao. And so o, es, a, omen, ete, usi contracted, and some forms look a little different. But basically, they were similar to luo. Luo, lues, lue, luomen, luete, luusin. But now we have a new set of endings we need to learn. And actually, the vocabulary in this new set of endings is all you need to learn, and you will understand the rest. And these endings are omai, a, with the iota subscript, eta, etai, ometha, este, ontai. This verb dechomai means I receive. This is actually what we call a middle, or in the present tense, it can also be a passive form. The middle and the passive forms of the verb dechomai are the same in the present tense. In fact, for many verbs like dechomai, the middle and passive forms are the same in the present tense, not in the other tenses. But the present tense is all we know right now. Present tense, I go, I see, I follow. Or present continuous, I am going, I am seeing, I am following. Present tense. Past tense would be I went, I saw, I followed. But we don't know that tense yet. We only know the present tense in Greek. So this is one of the first verbs that we learn. Actually, we are learning the main verbs that we call, well, we're going to call them deponent. That is the word we're going to use, and I introduced it to you already in the second video segment. You notice on page 88, Dr. McIver gives us this note. Verbs that use middle or passive verbal forms that are usually translated by the English active voice may be recognized in vocabulary lists, like this one we call V9, because it's the vocabulary list in chapter 9, and dictionaries, or lexicons, another word for dictionary, because they're listed with an omai ending. Almost all of them are not found with the active voice endings in the Greek New Testament. So, for example, you won't find decho. You'll only find dechomai, because there is no active voice for dechomai, I receive, or I welcome. There's only the ending omai. Such verbs should be translated with the English active voice, at least until chapter 24, where we talk about the middle and the passive. Most readers will be content to wait until chapter 24 for further explanations, and we are going to be patient. There's one exception, or actually three, but this one is in those three is an epsilon omega verb, except it's an epsilon omai verb. There is actually an active, but usually we have this middle and passive of phobe omai, and the contractions will make it similar with the contraction rules. But let's look at the vocabulary first before we have too much confusing information. The verbs with middle and passive forms, whose middle forms are usually translated by the English active voice. And these are very often used 116 times, 59 times, 667 times. So you notice that each of these verbs is used erchomai 631 times, are used very, very often in the Greek New Testament. So we must get to know them. And we look on the list, ap erchomai, which is, let's start here, erchomai, I go or I come. Ap erchomai simply adds the preposition apo to erchomai, so we have ap erchomai. And if this verb means I go or come, this one means I go away, I depart. Apo plus erchomai, it makes sense. I go or come, erchomai. Apo, away from. I go away, I depart. We're going to look at these words in a presentation in just a moment. For right now, just to remind you that on page 88, you have the vocabulary, page 88 and 89. And at the bottom of page 89, part 2 or section 2 of your homework begins. The first section is a separate document that's posted on Moodle. But on page 88 and 89, you find the vocabulary list and the notes. And he has a note for several of these verbs, which, for example, we need to point out, English has 2 separate verbs, go and come. New Testament Greek does not. Erchomai can mean either go or come. If the direction is important, the Greek makes this clear by use of a preposition, such as pros, towards. I go towards, or apo, I come from. The same will be true of poruomai, by the way. Now, he has some notes here, and you need to read these on page 89 for the vocabulary. So make sure that you read these carefully, but also that you learn all of these vocabulary words in vocabulary 9. Learn these well. Now, we're going to call these deponent verbs. You remember the word deponent. I'm not going to say anything more really about it, except that these forms, which are look middle or passive in the present tense, are translated in English with active voices. Not erchomai means I go or come. That's an active voice. It does not mean I am comed, I am goed. That would be a passive expression. But you cannot be goed. You cannot be comed. Now, there is this verb become, but that means something different. But all of these verbs really don't make any sense if you try to make them passive voice. Except perhaps this one, I am received, but we don't learn that form right now. Or I am greeted. We will learn the passive voice in chapter 24. What we need to know right now is simply that they look middle or passive, but they are translated active. So we call that deponent. Deponent verbs look middle or passive, but they are active in English translation. Not I am greeted by someone, but simply I greet, aspadzomai. And for the second part of your homework, you need to complete these exercises on page 89 and 90. And except for the last one, add accents, you don't need to do this. We're not learning accent rules, so just put an X through this. You don't need to do section F, but you do need to do sections A, B, C, D, and E. I have not printed these out for you, except just to say on the homework page that you need to do exercise 9. Just use your own pages to complete this homework. You also don't need to write the Greek, although it's a good exercise, but you do need to write the English translation. So let me just go through quickly the endings so that we're sure of what they are in chapter 9. So I'm going to, wait a minute. I'm going to share my screen. So we're looking at chapter 9 in the textbook, and you remember we have 3 kinds of voice in Koine Greek, in the Greek of the New Testament. We have the active voice. John bats the ball. Ball is the direct object. John is actively, he is the subject. John is doing the action. He initiates the action. John hits the ball. Then we have the middle voice, where Dr. McIver gives this word, the subject participates in the action. Sometimes it's reflexive. John hits the ball for himself. In the middle voice, actually, the subject is more involved, is concentrated in the action, and can be reflexive. The easiest way to remember the middle voice is this reflexive idea, but not all middle voices are actually reflexive. But if you remember he hits the ball for himself, you'll have the idea of the middle voice. Again, the active voice emphasizes the action of the verb. The middle voice emphasizes the actor, the subject of the verb. The action and the subject is being emphasized in the middle voice. In the passive voice, the action happens to the subject. John was hit by the ball. He was batting. Somehow it was a spinner or the bowler threw a bad pitch and it hit John in the head. John was hit by the ball. This is what we call passive voice. And we actually usually have to have by something because we don't know what it was that actually hit John. John didn't do this action. He didn't initiate it. He was hit by the ball. Now, chapter 9, deponent verbs. Some verbs look middle or passive in their endings, but they are always translated active. We call them deponent verbs, although some of them still have a middle voice idea. But for right now, if you write D, or if you write M/P, middle passive, either one is fine, because these verbs look middle or passive, but we translate them as active. Erchomai, I go, I come. So there's no difference in voice between this and I loose, or I go, or I see, or I observe, or I ask. There's no difference. The active voice is just that the ending is going to be middle or passive, and later on this will be important for us. Right now we just need to know that these verbs, erchomai, dechomai, I welcome, ginomai, I become, all have this ending, omai. The present tense in Greek does not distinguish between middle and passive. The endings look the same, so we only have one set of endings to learn. Omai, I am receiving, or I receive. Continuous action or simple present. Either one is fine. I am receiving, I receive. Omai, etai, ometha, este, ontai. Those are our new endings. With dechomai, I am receiving. Deche, you singular, are receiving. Dech etai, he, she, it is receiving. Dech ometha, we are receiving. Dech este, you, plural, are receiving. Dech ontai, they are receiving. Remember that Greek tells us who is doing the action by the ending of the verb. Dech is the stem. Omai is the ending. Omai, etai, ometha, este, ontai. So maybe you need to make up a new song. If you had the song O, Es, E, Om, and Et, Usi, and now you need to have a new little song that you make up yourself to learn these endings. Omai, etai, ometha, este, ontai. Omai, etai, ometha, este, ontai. Any way you can to memorize these endings. You need to know the vocabulary, dechomai, but you also need to know the endings because otherwise you won't know who is doing the action. O, es, e, ometha, omen, eta, usi, and doesn't work here. Only omai, etai, ometha, este, ontai work. So the new verb endings are in red font, and these are the ones you need to learn by memory. Now, if we take these verbs quickly, erchomai, ap erchomai, I go away or depart. Apo, I go away. Aspazomai, I greet. Notice you have to have the smooth breathing over the initial vowel alpha, even though it's not pronounced. It's not a rough breathing. Ha, it's just a smooth breathing, but you still have to have it. Aspazomai, I greet. Genomai is one of the most common verbs in the New Testament. I become, I come to be, it happens. It's very often used for something, it happens. Dechomai, we've just been using that one. I receive or take or welcome. Eis erchomai. Eis, the preposition, plus erchomai. Notice that we still have the initial epsilon. Eis erchomai. I come in, I go in. Makes sense. Eis means into, go into, come into. Greek doesn't make a difference, distinguish between go and come. Not like in English. Ex erchomai. Notice that instead of ek, instead of kappa, we have xi. Ex erchomai, I go out, I come out. Ek plus erchomai. Then we simply have erchomai, I go or come. And this is a very common verb in the New Testament. You really have to know it. Erchomai. Pros erchomai, I come towards, I go to, I approach. Pros, the preposition, and erchomai, towards, and I go towards, I come towards, I go towards, I approach. I come to, go to or towards. Either translation is fine. Pros uchomai. Now, here's you have to be careful because many students mix this up. They don't read carefully and they read a ro here, and there is no ro here. Pros uchomai means I pray. Apokrinomai means I answer. But this is one of the verbs whose forms will be passive, along with phobeomai, which also is an epsilon verb, contract verb. I fear. By the way, this is easy to remember by the word phobos, the Greek word phobos. Phobos is the word for fear. And we have in English the word phobia. If someone has a type of fear. Arachnophobia means a fear of spiders, because spiders are a group of animals or insects. Actually, they're not insects. They're arachnoids. So arachnophobia is a fear of spiders. And we have claustrophobia, which is a fear of closed spaces. All kinds of phobia from this word phobeomai. Poruomai, I go. More I go, but also sometimes I come, because again, like erchomai, Greek does not make a distinction. I go, proceed, or journey. It's more used for traveling. Now we have some prepositions that we need to learn, and also the case that we use with them. Es, and the accusative case, I go into. It means into. Es, into. By the way, do not lead me into temptation means to lead into, under the control of temptation. And sometimes you see the translation, please do not let me be tempted, which is wrong. It's not a good translation of the Greek. When Jesus says, pray that you do not enter into es, he means to come under the control of temptation, that I fall in temptation. We're asking God not to let me fall. We're not asking God to keep us away from temptation, because he won't do that. He will let us be tempted, but he will not let us fall if we pray and do the things we need to do when temptation comes. Pros also takes the accusative case and means towards. Again, pros is a preposition that takes the accusative case. Nouns, they'll have the accusative case and means towards. We'll just do a little bit of practice. First, the endings. Ap erchomai, ap erche, ap erchetai, ap erchametha, ap erchete, ap erchontai. I go, depart. You go away or depart. He, she, it goes away, departs. Notice the S, the inflection in English. Amitha, we go away, depart. Ete. Sorry, this should be este. This is a mistake. I won't take the time to correct it. Just please correct it in your minds. Este, not ete. I made a mistake. Este. Ap erch este. You plural, go away, depart. Ap erch ontai. They go away or depart. Pros uchomai. I pray. You pray. Pros uch e. He, she prays. Pros uch etai. Notice the endings. Omai, e, etai. We pray. Pros uch ometha. Not omen, but ometha. You plural pray. Pros uch este. Here I have it correct. They pray, pros uch ontai. Now, all of these could be translated as continuous present. I am praying, you are praying, he, she, it is praying. But notice that this is always still the active voice, even though these endings are in Greek middle or passive voice. Notice what happens with phobeomai. Because we have an epsilon here, we have a contraction. It becomes phobumai, I fear. You fear, phobe. There's no change. He, she, it fears. Epsilon becomes, and there's a contraction here, phobetai. We fear phobumetha. Why? Because epsilon and omicron become u, phobumetha, instead of phobometha. You plural fear phobesthe, because epsilon and epsilon together make eta with a circumflex accent. They fear becomes phobuntai, because epsilon here, epsilon, and ontai combine to make untai, phobuntai. So instead of phobomai, because the verb is phobeomai, in the Greek New Testament, I fear, or I am fearing, phobumai. Phobetai instead of phobetai. He, she fears. Or he, she is fearing, if I use the continuous present. Let's take one sentence before we finish. The Son of Man. See, the subject is in the nominative case, ho, weos. The son, genitive case, tu anthropou. The Son of Man. You probably want to translate the Son of the Man, but this is a special name that Jesus used for himself that we translate in English simply by the Son of Man. It comes from Daniel chapter 7, and it actually refers to the deity of Jesus, that he is God. But you have to know Daniel chapter 7 to understand that. For right now, we just translate the Son of Man comes into, etai, to come into, etai, come into. And notice we have the preposition es to make it even more emphatic, comes into or is coming, es ton cosmon, into the world. Notice this is the preposition es, and we said es takes the accusative case. So instead of ha cosmos, we must have ton cosmon, es ton cosmon. Es etai. The Son of Man is coming into the world. Now, in English, we would put the verb here and into the world after the verb. So a good translation has to be the Son of Man is coming into the world, or simple present, the Son of Man comes into the world. And if you have any other more questions, I think we have done enough here. If you have more questions about your homework, please WhatsApp or ask your tutors for help in explaining. Remember also that you can take your homework, the part 2 of your homework, that's not the English grammar, but translation of the exercises in chapter 9. The odd numbered questions, you find the answers in the back of the book. So try them first, the odd numbered ones, and then go to the back of the book and see if you got it right. And if you didn't get it right, then ask yourself why. What did I do wrong? And as you think about it, I think you will see the answer. If you still don't understand, then contact one of the tutors, Mr. Masood or Ms. Zaneria, to help you understand better the concept of these deponent verbs, we call them, erchomai, prosuchomai, dechomai. It really isn't complicated. You basically have some new vocabulary words to learn and a new set of endings for the present tense. Omai, etai, amatha, estha, ontai.